I remember when it was announced that the sequel to Into the Spider-Verse would be split into 2 movies, releasing in 2022 and 2024. Thinking to myself, wow, they're really going for the crown and trying to have their own little Infinity War Endgame 2-parter. But then Across the Spider-Verse got delayed. So naturally I'm thinking, alright, if they're gonna delay the first one, then they're probably gonna have to delay the second one. But no, it did not move from that March 2024 release date. And after sitting down and watching Across the Spider-Verse, I thought to myself, wow, how are they going to release the conclusion that'll probably have bigger set pieces than this one, pushing the envelope harder than this one, within 9 months? And the answer is, they aren't. I don't think it's even a question on if Beyond the Spider-Verse will get delayed. I think it's a question on how long will the delay be. Because this movie is not that far along at all. There's plenty of animation to be done, the voice work still needs to be done, and if they're not given enough time, we may end up with multiple versions of the same movie in theaters once again, just like what's happening right now with Across the Spider-Verse. So when are we getting this movie? And who at Sony is responsible for this horrible time crunch? Let us ponder! But first, we have a word from our sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends, and the magnificent Professor Death Knight.
Professor Death Knight here from Tuleria University, legally not a school, with a math problem. If you create a hit mobile game in 2019, how many champions will you have now? Over 700! Not only does Raid have hundreds of rad champions, it also has 15 amazing factions. Faction Pop Quiz, can you name the latest faction? If you said the elusive Sylvan Watchers, you're right! Okay, class, any questions?
Professor Death Knight, if I may ask, who is your new favorite champion aside from Ultimate Death Knight?
Alright, if I can't say Ultimate Death Knight, then I gotta say Ultimate Death Knight. He's my #1 boy. I'm not supposed to have favorites, but I do.
Alright, last question. What's it like seeing all these fresh new champions? Are you nervous that any will replace you?
Nervous? Who said anything about being nervous? It certainly wasn't me. Oh, it was you? Yes, I'm nervous. What if they introduce some guy named Mega Death Knight? That's it for today, class. Your homework is to download Raid. Just kidding, I know you've already done that, so no homework. Except there will be a test of Valor, so study up. But you can use your phones, because it's a mobile game. All right, class dismissed.
Raid Call of Arbiter is in full swing now. What I love about the game is the variety of champions. They all look so cool. To celebrate this epic limited series, Raid's adding some of the new characters from the series as champions you can play with in-game. The first one is Artok, a mighty orc warlord. What's super cool is that Artok is going to be available to everyone for free. All you have to do is log into Raid for 7 days between now and July 24th. And if you haven't started playing Raid yet, use my link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses. We're talking an epic champion Talia from the Sacred Order faction and other useful things. And once you're in and crushing your enemies, come find me under the name Ostrich Vox. So just hit my link in the description and I'll see you on the battlefield. Okay, so how far along are they actually with Beyond the Spider-Verse? According to one animator, not that far along at all. Certainly not enough to hit that March 2024 release date. Recently, Vulture released an article where they interviewed 4 artists who worked on Across the Spider-Verse, who unfortunately didn't have very nice things to say about their working conditions. Now keep in mind, this article does not reflect everyone's experience with working on Across the Spider-Verse, though I am willing to wager that it does represent more than just these 4 people's experiences. But still, with a team of 1,000 artists involved in different parts of production, there's just no way they didn't have different experiences and different workloads with different tasks. Nevertheless, just one bad experience is unacceptable in its own right, as no one deserves to be exploited and be worked well past exhaustion just because it's in the name of art. At the end of the day, while Spider-Verse is a massive achievement, it's also a big IP from a multi-million-dollar corporation. I don't believe it's worth artists suffering over on wages that allow them to barely survive in California, when at the end of the day, the people who are going to benefit from this the most monetarily are going to be the already filthy rich executives. Yeah, nah-uh, either way you're getting your bag. So how about you don't fuck over your artists in the process? the working conditions are not sustainable. To quote the Vulture article, multiple Across the Spider-Verse crew members, ranging from artists to production executives who have worked anywhere from 5 to a dozen years in the animation business, described the process of making the $150 million Sony project as uniquely arduous, involving a relentless kind of revisionism that compelled approximately 100 artists to flee the movie before its completion. 4 of these crew members agreed to speak pseudonymously about the sprint to finish the movie 3 years into the sequel's development and production, a period whose franticness they attribute to Lord's management style. In particular, his seeming inability to conceptualize 3D animation during the early planning stages and his preference to edit fully rendered work instead. While frequent major overhauls are standard operating procedure in animation, those changes typically occur early on during development and storyboarding stages. But these Spider-Verse 2 crew members say they were asked to make alterations to already approved animated sequences that created a backlog of work across multiple late-stage departments. Across the Spider-Verse was meant to debut in theaters in April of 2022, before it was postponed to October of that year and then June 2023, owing to what Entertainment Weekly reported as pandemic-related delays. However, the 4 crew members say animators who were hired in the spring of 2021 sat idle for anywhere from 3 to 6 months that year while Lord tinkered with the movie in the layout stage, when the first 3D representation of storyboards are created. As a result, these individuals say they were pushed to work more than 11 hours a day, 7 days a week, for more than a year to make up for time lost, and were forced back to the drawing board as many as 5 times to revise work during the final rendering stage. The directors were overshadowed by the forceful presence of Lord, who sought final approval for every sequence in this film. Miller, for his part, was said to be MIA for much of the production. Really putting the Lord in Phil Lord, eh? Of course, longtime op of a lot of Spider-Man movie superfans, Amy Pascal, had nothing helpful to say either. One of the things about animation that makes it such a wonderful thing to work on is that you get to keep going until the story is right. If the story isn't right, you have to keep going until it is. To the workers who felt demoralized by having to revise final renders 5 times in a row, I guess, welcome to making a movie. And see, this is the problem. You get to keep going until the story is right is not the right mindset to have with animation, especially because it's known to be ultra time consuming. If you want to keep going over and over until it's right, don't have a release date. Give it an infinite budget so animators don't really have an end date and can just keep working on it without destroying themselves. But really, Phil Lord should just stop changing everything late into production. Because riddle me this, guys, if they're constantly redoing sequences for Across the Spider-Verse over and over until the movie itself is in theaters, then how much time do you think they had to work on Beyond the Spider-Verse? Because, the answer is not much. To quote the article once more, I've seen people say, oh, they probably worked on Beyond the Spider-Verse at the same time. There's no way that movie's coming out then in March. There's been progress on the pre-production side of things, but as far as the production side goes, the only progress that's been made on the third one is any exploration or tests that were done before the movie was split into 2 parts. Everyone's been fully focused on Across the Spider-Verse and barely crossing the finish line. And now it's like, oh yeah, now we gotta do the other one. But honestly, animation, despite being the longest part of production, is only one aspect we have to worry about. Because I'm not quite convinced the film is even written, given that Haley Steinfeld, voice of Gwen Stacy, had said a week after Across the Spider-Verse released that she had yet to record anything for Beyond the Spider-Verse, which she found strange because she was recording for Across since Into the Spider-Verse released. That's like 4 or 5 years of recording! If Phil Lord is constantly changing the story itself, then it makes sense the actors haven't been given anything to record yet, because whatever script, whatever story beats they had for Beyond the Spider-Verse now have to be reworked so that they're compatible and consistent with all of the revisions made to Across. So now let's be honest with ourselves. Forget a March 2024 release date. Do you think they can basically make an entire sequel, which again is gonna be the thrilling conclusion to this trilogy, within a year and a half if we just threw 2024 completely out of the equation? I would say no. Even if they reuse assets and locations, which I think is an inevitability, I feel like they would need 2 years minimum to make a decent sequel. But given that the train scene basically took 5 years to complete, I imagine whatever final confrontation they're cooking up with the spot is going to take more than 2 years years to put together. Personally, I think we're not gonna see Beyond the Spider-Verse until 2026 or 2027. Assuming proper production starts this year, summer 2026 would feel like the best bet. A proper 3 years to put everything together. And I know 2027 sounds a little excessive, but again, it's the finale. It deserves to look as good as possible without artists being exploited. The only issue I could see is if Sony doesn't want the conclusion of their multiverse story to be in direct competition with Marvel's conclusion to their multiverse story, as Avengers, Kang Dynasty, and Secret Wars are also supposed to come out in 2026 and 2027. But of course, that's if the whole Jonathan Majors fiasco doesn't set them back. Honestly though, if I was Marvel, I would take some time to figure stuff out and just drop Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars on the 10-year anniversaries of Infinity War and Endgame, but that's just me. And I think Sony may be the reason why the film hasn't officially been delayed yet, not Phil Lord. Now, this is pure speculation, but Sony controls the release dates, they control the delays, and they control the cancellations. And Spider-Man is really the only franchise they have left. It's why they won't cancel that wrestler movie even after Bad Bunny himself left. You know, the only reason why that film was going to exist. Well, I mean, it's on hold indefinitely, but the fact it isn't flat out canceled is telling. They care about their bottom dollar. And right now, what they think is gonna make them cheddar is Beyond the Spider-Verse in 2024. And I really think they're gonna push off delaying it for as long as humanly possible. Even if they know it won't come out by then. They won't swallow their pride until they're absolutely forced to. It honestly reminds me a little bit of Attack on Titan the final season, how a lot of people meme on that being split into bajillion parts, and a lot of the blame goes to MAPPA. And don't get me wrong, the folks running MAPPA aren't saints either. But with Attack on Titan specifically, the production committee has set all the air dates, and MAPPA just has to do their best to comply. That's why the big finale was supposed to be one giant special, but then MAPPA had to announce that they could only get the first part done by March, delaying the second part to fall of this year. And it looks like they're still recording and doing animation for it. But a lot of people online just point their fingers at MAPPA and go, they're milking it, when in just this specific instance, I really don't think they're at fault. With Spider-Verse, I'm not saying Phil Lord is innocent of exploiting any workers. The dude clearly has a lot to learn about the animation process still, and how much can be feasibly changed. Because this problem isn't just a Spider-Verse thing. The reason why the new Clone High has rigged animation, as we recently learned, is because Phil Lord is having a bunch of revisions done to the story, even when animation would come back in color, which is basically the last stage. My brother in Christ, how do you become the villain of one of the movies you directed? Lego movie? Micromanaging bots? Hello?
All I'm asking for is total perfection.
Although I'm someone who can't wait to see what happens next in the Spider-Verse, I care about the well-being of artists a little bit more, and have no qualms waiting another 3 to 5 years to get that conclusion. I just hope the general audience will learn to have that same mentality, because otherwise, it's gonna be a long winter. But yeah, that was about it. Hope you learned something today. Comment down below when you think Beyond the Spider-Verse is gonna hit, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.